Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about factoring trinomials in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. If you remember last time, we talked about how to factor it when the coefficient in front of the x squared here was just 1. And in this case now we're going to go farther and investigate how to factor polynomials when there is a coefficient out there other than 1. Now there's two ways to do this. The two ways are trial and error, and the other one is called AC method. You can also call it factoring by grouping, other names that go with it, but I'll call it the AC method, and you'll see why we call it that shortly. I put a star by this one because this is the one that we're going to really investigate here. We're really going to discuss this one here. We're not going to really do that one. Trial and error is fine. It's just time consuming, and this way here, as long as you know how to do it, you'll always be able to factor it down completely. So let's take a look at some steps that are required in order to do this AC method. Here are the steps for the AC method. Step 1, we have to find the factors of a times c. And whatever those factors are, there's going to be a list of them. We need to find the pair of them which the sum of them, or when you add them, they equal b. Now what I'm talking about here is this part here. This is the form of the trinomials that we're factoring. So we're going to take a times c, multiply that together. We're going to get some number, and whatever that number is, we need to find two factors of it in which we add together to get b. Okay? So a times c gives us a number. Find the factors of a times c and pick the pair in which the sum of those equal b. When we get those two factors, we're going to use them to rewrite the middle term. You'll see that much clearer in an example. Once we've done this, we're going to factor by grouping, which is something that you saw a couple of sections ago. And in doing some examples here, this will also refresh on factor by grouping. Let's take a look at this example. We'll do 3 or 4 of these, but let's start with this one. If you recall the steps that we just saw, step 1 was to find factors of AC that add up to equal B. Well, AC in this case, AC, let's write that a little clearer, A times C, that's 2 times 15. Okay, remember the form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So the first coefficient and the last term here. 2 times 15, that's 30. Okay, and our b value is here, that's 13. Now what we're trying to do is think of some factors of 30 that add up to give 13. And you can list them off as you want. You can write them on the side here. We can go, okay, we got 1 and 30. We got 2 and 15. 3 and 10. We got 5 and 6. Now out of these sets of factors here, if we add each one of these, the only one that adds up to give me 13 is this one here. Okay, 1 plus 30 is 31, that's 17, that's 13, and that's 11. So this is the one that we actually want. So let's get rid of this. So what we know now is these are the factors that we want to use. We want to use 10 and 3. Okay, so that's step 1. We finished step 1. Step 2 is to use these two numbers to rewrite the middle term. Now this is the key part. So what we'll do is we'll take 2x squared plus 10x plus 3x plus 15. What I've done is I've used these two numbers, and instead of writing 13x, I split it up into equaling 10x plus 3x, because if I add these together now, I will get 13x again, and nothing has changed here, okay? So the key part is we have to split this number into two numbers, okay? Those two numbers are found by doing this AC process over here. You could not have done this by picking any other numbers that equal 13. For example, if we would have picked 11 and 2. Well, 11 plus 2 does equal 13, but remember, it has to satisfy this condition. 11 times 2, that does not equal 30. All right? Once we get it here, we finish step 2, and we can go on to step 3, which is factoring by grouping. So if you recall, what we're going to do is we're going to take the two terms on the left and group them. And then we're going to take the two terms on the right and group those as well. Now let's take a look at this side here. We've got two terms. Is there a common factor between the two? The answer is yes. 2x is common in both of these terms. So I can take a 2x out of this, and what I'm left with is just x plus 5. All right? I have to take this and divide both of these, and I get x plus 5 when I do that. Now over here, is there a common factor I can take out? The answer is yes, and it's 3. If I took a 3 out of both of these, that would leave me with x here, and if I divided the 3 here, that would leave me with 5. Now, if you remember, in order for this to work, these two needed to be the same, and we have that. That's what we want with factoring by grouping. Okay? If you're still confused on this one, you got to refresh on factoring by grouping. Now we write our final answer. We write what we see twice. And we write what's left here in the other part. So this would be the factored form of the original polynomial. We can of course check this by doing FOIL expansion or multiplication of the binomials here. Try that on your own and make sure you get back 2x squared plus 13x plus 15. You definitely should. Let's move on to another example. Let's factor 6x squared minus 11x minus 10. We're going to use the AC method again. The more and more we do it, the clearer and clearer it should become. Now in this case, a times c is 6 times negative 10. Make sure you include signs. So 6 times negative 10 is negative 60. All right? And b here, this is negative 11. So now what we want to do is, again, find the factors of negative 60. When we add them, we get negative 11. Let's write them here and see what we can do. Well, I know I got 1 and 60. Now I know one of these has to be negative because that's negative. So when I multiply, one of them has to be negative. But I can tell right off the top that no matter which one of these is negative, if this was negative or if this one was negative, there's no way that when I add them, I'm going to get negative 11. We also have 2 and 30. Again, the same problem comes that came with this one. One of them has to be negative, and no matter which one I make negative, I'm not getting a negative 11 from it. How about 3 times 20? Well, we're still having the same issue. One of these is negative, but no matter which one is negative, I'm not going to get negative 11. If this one was negative, I would get positive 17. And if this one was negative, when I add them, I would get negative 17. How about 4? 4 times 15. Now this one we can see, it looks like there's some way to get to 11 from here. So that's actually a good thing. We just need to figure out which one's negative. Well, If I did negative 4 times negative 4 and 15, multiplying them does give me negative 60, but adding them gives me positive 11. So that can't be right. Let's go the other way. What if we did 4 and negative 15? Again, we get negative 60. And this time when we add them, we actually get negative 11. So these are the two numbers that we're going to use. A good trick here is when you look at these numbers that you've listed, the factors, just ask yourself, even from addition or subtraction, can I get this number? You can tell even if we added these or subtracted them, the best we're going to get is either 32 or 28. That's not 11. Adding and subtracting these, that's not 11. But here, if I add them, of course, I get 19 if they're positive. But because one's negative, we got to subtract something. And subtracting these, they'll give me 11. So you can kind of see it if you just look up. This one's the one that's related to 11 the closest. Okay. All right, let's list these numbers here and make some room. Okay, so that was step number 1, was to figure out the factors. That was step 1. Now we're going to use these two numbers to rewrite that middle term. So we've taken this negative 11x and turned it into 4x minus 15x. Okay, remember, these two numbers came directly from this. That's why you have to do this step first. Now let's group them. Now when I group these together, I need to factor this negative out. And that makes it plus 10 because I took this negative out, so that becomes positive and that becomes positive. The reason that I did that, just as a reminder, I want to keep these signs the same because at the end when we factor by grouping, both of these two, the two things here should be the same. And you'll see what we're saying again in just a second. So is there a common factor here? And the answer is yes, it's 2x. 2x is common between both of these terms. If I took a 2x out of here, I'd have a 3x left. Just divide these two and you'll see. And over here, 4x divided by 2x is the x divides out to 1. 4 divided by 2 is just 2. Now we look at these two terms here. Let's get rid of that as like plus or minus. Let's look at these two terms here. It looks like they have a common factor of 5. The GCF is 5. 5 goes into both. We can't say x because both don't have an x. So we can take a 5 out. Now in doing so, dividing these, we would get 3x here, and 10 divided by 5 would be 2. Alright? Notice these are the same. That's what we want. So we write what we see the same. And whatever we have left on these outside terms, we write in its own part. Okay? And we've done it again. We've taken this and factored it down to this. Just doing this a few times, you'll see that it becomes easier and easier as you go. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, so we got 2x squared plus 19x minus 10. Let's get started with step 1, AC. AC method. AC is 2 times negative 10. This is negative 20. B is 19. Positive. Now this one is relatively simple to spot right from the beginning. we know it's going to be 20 and 1. We know that because we can get 19 from 20 and 1. We just got to figure out which one's negative. So we know it's going to be 20 and 1. One of these has to be negative here because we need to get negative 20. If we make this negative, it'd be negative 20 plus 1. That would give us negative 19. But we need positive 19. So this one should be negative because now, again, multiplication, we get negative 20. Add these, positive 19. So we have what we need here when it comes to the two numbers. Step 2, we rewrite this middle term using these two numbers. And what we have here is 2x squared plus 20x minus 1x minus 10. Now, you don't really need to write the 1 here, but I'm just doing it to demonstrate that these two numbers are what go here. Let's get this all put together so we can factor by grouping. We got those two. Now remember, we have a minus sign out here. We need to factor that out. We need to factor that out, that minus sign. Okay, on this side over here, the common factor, it appears to be 2x. 2x goes into both of these terms. If I divide here, I get x plus 5. Two x goes into both of these terms. If I divide here, I get x. And then 20x divided by 2x, that's just 10. Now over here, we already have x plus 10, so we can just take out a 1. The reason that we took out the 1 was because, remember, we want these to be the same. But that was already x plus 10. So I just pulled out the 1 there, so when I write my answer, x plus 10, I write what I see twice, and then I write what's left. If I wouldn't have put that 1 there, some students could get confused by that. They may not write anything because there's nothing here. There is a 1 there, it's implied, but they don't see it and they may skip over it. So if you don't have to take anything out to get these two to be the same, just put a 1 out there, all right? Okay, I think we can do one more, and then you can do some practice on this. All right, we need to factor 8y squared minus 10y minus 3. Now, don't be concerned about what the variable letter is. We could use any letter here, even though general form here has x's in it. Same rules apply, even if the variable is a different letter. Let's start with a times c. Well, that's 8 times negative 3. This is negative 24. And our b value, which is here, is negative 10. All right, we need to get the two numbers that when we multiply together, we get negative 24, and when we add them, we get negative 10. Again, because this number is negative, we know that one of the numbers that we're going to be multiplying is going to be negative. We need to make sure the one that we make negative gives us the sum of negative 10. Now we can just go through our head here and say, okay, it's not 24 and 1. There's no way I get 10. How about 12 and 2? Well, right there I can see a way to get to 10 from 12 and 2. All right, what if we said negative 12 and positive 2? What if we did that? Well, negative 12 times 2 is negative 24. Negative 12 plus 2, that certainly is negative 10. These are the correct numbers to use. Now let's take these two numbers here that we found, And let's rewrite this middle term. Alright, so now we have negative 12y and plus 2y that came from these numbers. Of course, if we add them together, we just get back what we started with. So we have not made any changes to the polynomial. We've just changed how it was written. Let's group them. Now, if you're wondering why I did not factor anything out over here like I have been with negative signs, look at the signs. They're both negatives here. We want these signs to be the same. Alright? Over here we can take out a 4y. Dividing this gives me 2y minus 3. Now look, I already have this again. I already have it here, so I'm just going to take out a 1. Remember, the key is these two need to be the same at the end. We write down what we see the same, and whatever is left here we put next to it. Okay, so we've now factored this one, this polynomial, into this. Alright, that was about 4 examples of this. I think with practice this becomes easier and easier as you do it. It is tricky when you first start. There are some things you have to learn. But just practice it, you'll be fine. It becomes very easy once you get into the groove here. But of course, learning is the tough part, that's the struggle. So do some practice of these. And next time we'll talk about other techniques in factoring.